The town of Ashveil sat at the edge of the known world, which was a dramatic way of saying it sat at the edge of the maps. And the maps, as Ren Callow could personally confirm, were wrong about at least 4 things within a day's ride in every direction. He had been correcting maps for 11 years. He had the calluses to prove it, the bad knee from a fall in the Greyvast Mountains, and a reputation in certain cartographic circles as the man who had definitively established that the Thornwood River did not, in fact, empty into the Selvar Sea, but rather into a lake that had no name yet, and that Ren had labeled Callow's mistake on his working copy because he had walked 3 days in the wrong direction looking for the coast. He had not intended to stop in Ashveil. He had intended to pass through, resupply, and continue northeast toward the unmapped plateau that 3 separate expedition reports described in 3 mutually contradictory ways. One said it was forested. One said it was bare rock. One said there was a city on it, which Ren privately doubted but professionally could not dismiss. He had intended to spend 2 days in Ashveil. He had been there for 9 when the fever found him. Not the kind of fever that announced itself with drama. Not the sudden collapse, the violent symptoms, the clear narrative of a man being struck down. The kind that arrived quietly, like a guest who had been waiting in the hall for some time and had finally decided to come in. He noticed it first as a difficulty concentrating on his notes, then as a warmth at the back of his neck that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun, then as a morning where he stood in his rented room looking at his mapping instruments and could not remember what order they went in their case, which was the order he had packed them in for 11 years. He went to the clinic on the advice of his landlady, who said it in the tone of a woman who had watched enough travelers deteriorate to know what the early stages looked like and was not going to have it happen in her establishment. The clinic was on the east side of Ashveil's main square, a long stone building that had been a stable in a previous life and still smelled faintly of it despite the herbs hanging from every available beam. 2 rooms. A waiting area with a bench that listed slightly to the left. An inner room where the actual work happened, separated from the waiting area by a curtain that had once been green and was now the color of something that had made its peace with the world. Ren sat on the listing bench and waited. He heard from behind the curtain the sounds of someone finishing something, the clink of instruments, water poured, a drawer opened and closed with the precision of someone who knew exactly which drawer and exactly why. Then the curtain moved, and the healer came out, and Ren looked at her and revised several of his assumptions about Ashveil. She was tall, orc tall, which was a different category of tall than human tall, the kind of tall that required the world to accommodate it rather than the other way around. Dark green skin, smooth except for the fine lines at the corners of her eyes that were not age lines exactly, but the lines of a face that had been focused for a long time. Black hair pulled back from her face with the efficiency of someone who had stopped thinking about her hair years ago. 2 small tusks at her lower jaw, worn smooth at the tips. Her hands, when she came toward him with a lantern, were the hands of a healer. Long-fingered, careful. The kind of hands that had learned to be precise because imprecision had consequences. She looked at him the way she probably looked at everyone, with the complete, unsentimental attention of someone assessing a problem. "Name," she said. "Ren Callow. What's wrong?" "I'm not sure," he said. "Fever, I think. Difficulty concentrating. Started 4 days ago, possibly 5. Possibly. I was working. I don't always notice days when I'm working." She looked at him, not with disapproval, with the expression of someone filing information. "What kind of work?" "Cartography. Maps." He gestured vaguely at the northeast. "There's a plateau." "I know about the plateau," she said. "Everyone who comes through here is going to the plateau or coming back from it." She set the lantern down. "Sit still." He sat still. She examined him with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Not bored, not mechanical, but practiced. Temperature at the pulse points, the eyes, the throat. Her fingers were cool against his jaw when she checked the lymph nodes, and he noticed she moved without hesitation, without the slight pause some healers had when touching a human patient, the pause of adjusting for something different. "How long have you been in Ashveil?" she said. 9 days. Before that, 3 weeks in the Greyvast foothills. Before that, the Thornwood Basin." He paused. "I drink boiled water. I've learned." "You didn't learn early enough," she said without particular judgment. "You've picked up a basin fever. Not the bad kind, the inconvenient kind. 2 weeks, possibly 3. Ren looked at her. "I have a plateau to map. The plateau will still be there in 3 weeks. The weather window won't." The northeast approach closes in 3 weeks, possibly 4, she said. You have time if you don't make yourself worse by leaving too early. She went to the shelf behind her, began measuring something into a small cloth. The fever will peak in the next 2 days. After that it comes down. After that you need a week of rest before you're fit to travel. And I mean rest, not light work. I could rest and do light work. You could, she said. You'd relapse in the gray vast foothills with no healer within 4 days' ride, and I would hear about it eventually from someone who found what was left of your maps. She turned and held out the cloth packet. Twice a day in hot water. Don't skip doses because you feel better. You'll feel better because of the doses. Ren took the packet. How much? She named a number. He paid it without argument, which seemed to surprise her slightly. The slight recalibration of a person who had expected negotiation. I'll need to see you in 2 days, she said. Earlier if the fever spikes. What constitutes a spike, she told him. He noted it in the small notebook he kept in his coat pocket, which she watched with an expression he couldn't immediately read. You take notes on everything, she said. It was not a question. Professional habit, he said. I'm sorry if it's not, she said. Most people don't listen carefully enough to take notes. She moved the curtain aside, the indication of dismissal efficient and clear. 2 days. Don't walk further than you need to. The plateau. 2 days, she said. He went. Her name was Sarah Voss. He learned this from his landlady, who knew everything about everyone in Ashveil, with the thoroughness of a woman who had been providing accommodation to travelers for 30 years, and understood that information was a form of hospitality. Sarah Voss had been the clinic healer in Ashveil for 6 years. Before that, she had been a battlefield medic in the border wars, the ones that had officially ended 4 years ago and unofficially continued in the form of the aftermath, which was in some ways worse because the aftermath did not have a clear enemy or a clear end. She had come to Ashveil when the wars ended and had stayed because Ashveil needed a healer, and because, his landlady said with the tone of someone reporting a fact without editorializing, Sarah Voss did not appear to have anywhere else to be. Ren thought about this while the fever peaked, which it did with the punctuality she had predicted, on the second morning. He lay in his rented bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about nowhere else to be, and about the 6 years of it, and about the lines at the corners of her eyes that were not age lines exactly. He went back to the clinic on the second day. The fever had broken overnight, which she confirmed with the same efficient attention, and which she appeared to take as expected rather than as good news. The medicine is working, she said. Yes, he said. Thank you. She looked at him as though thank you was a mildly unusual thing for a patient to say. She moved on quickly. Another week of the doses. Then we'll see. How are you? Ren said. She stopped, not a dramatic stop, just a pause in the movement from shelf to counter, a moment where the hands stilled. She looked at him over her shoulder. I'm fine, she said, in the tone of a person who has said I'm fine many times and has not often been asked to elaborate. You look tired, Ren said. It came out more directly than he had intended, which was a hazard of 11 years of traveling alone. He had lost some of the social smoothing that happened naturally when you spent time around people who expected it. She turned. Her expression was not offended. It was assessing again, but differently. The assessment of someone encountering something unexpected and determining what category it belonged to. I'm always tired, she said. It's a border clinic. There are more patients than there are hours. Is there anyone who helps you? A woman comes in twice a week, Sarah said. For the straightforward cases. She paused. Why are you asking? Because you asked me what was wrong when I came in, Ren said, and no one asked you the same question, and that seemed like an oversight. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. The lantern light caught the amber in her eyes. Not warm amber like fire, but deep amber like resin, like something preserved. You're a cartographer, she said. Yes. You map things that other people haven't looked at carefully enough. That's one way to say it. She turned back to the shelf. Come back in 5 days. Take the doses. He went. At the door he paused. Is there a good place to sit outside, he said, for working? My room is. The bench in the square faces south, she said. Out of the wind if you sit near the wall. Thank you, he said. Stop thanking me, she said. You've paid. He thanked her anyway, quietly, and left. He sat on the bench near the wall and worked on his maps and thought about what she had said, about the plateau and about the weather window, and about 3 weeks, possibly 4. He thought about his notes from the gray vast foothills, which were detailed and accurate in the topography and almost entirely silent on the human geography. The clinics, the healers. The people who stayed in the border towns when everyone else was passing through or passing on. His maps were very good at terrain. They were less good at what the terrain did to people over time. On the fourth day, one day early, he went back to the clinic. Not because the fever had returned. Because the landlady's youngest had cut his hand on something in the kitchen yard and needed stitching. And the landlady was occupied with 3 other guests. And Wren was available, and it seemed practical. He sat in the waiting area with the child, who was 8 and more interested in the instruments visible through the curtain gap than in the cut on his hand, which had clotted cleanly and was not serious. Sarah came out. She looked at the child, then at Wren. He cut his hand, Wren said. His mother is occupied. I brought him. She looked at the hand, assessed it efficiently, and took the child into the inner room. Wren could hear her voice through the curtain, speaking to the child with a matter-of-fact calm that was different from how she spoke to adults, he noticed. More direct, less filtering. Children, it seemed, got the same information as adults, but with simpler words and no assumption that they needed managing. The child came back out with 3 neat stitches and an expression of profound satisfaction. It didn't hurt much, the child said. It will later, Sarah said from behind the curtain. Tell your mother. I'll tell her, Wren said, a pause. You don't need to have come, Sarah said. He needs someone to sit with him, Wren said. He was frightened. Another pause, longer. Most adults don't notice when children are frightened, Sarah said. They notice when children are crying. It's not the same thing. No, Wren said. It isn't. He took the child back to the landlady. He returned to the bench in the square and worked on his maps and thought about the difference between frightened and crying and about the 6 years of the border clinic and about the lines at the corners of her eyes. He came back on the 5th day as instructed. She checked his temperature, his pulse, the color of his eyes. She asked whether he had taken all the doses. He had. She asked whether he had rested. He had mostly. Mostly, she repeated. I did light work, he said. Maps. Sitting down, I said rest. Sitting down is rest. Not when your mind is, she stopped. Started again. You were mapping at the bench outside. Yes. For how many hours? 5, he said. Perhaps 6, that's not rest. My mind rests when it's working, he said. Doing nothing makes me worse. He paused. I know that sounds. It sounds accurate, she said unexpectedly. Some people rest by stopping. Some people rest by doing the right kind of thing. She was quiet for a moment. The fever is almost gone. Another week of doses. Then I'll clear you to travel. And the plateau? The plateau, she said, will still be there. He looked at her. She was making a note in the patient ledger. His entry, the dates, the doses, the progress. Her handwriting was small and precise. The handwriting of someone who had learned to fit a great deal of information into a small space. Do you ever leave Ashveil? He said. She did not look up from the ledger. Occasionally. For what? Supply runs, consultations with the clinic in Hartmere, when they have something I don't know how to handle. She paused. Medical reasons. Not for, he searched for the word. Not for yourself. She looked up then. The amber eyes. The assessment that was becoming, he noticed, something slightly different from pure assessment. Something that was also faintly curiosity. Cartographers ask a lot of questions, she said. It's how we learn what's actually there, he said. She closed the ledger. I haven't left for myself in 4 years, she said. There's always something that needs doing. There's always something that needs doing everywhere, Wren's. That's not a reason. That's a condition. She looked at him for a long moment. He held it. Had learned in 11 years of asking questions of people who weren't sure they wanted to answer that the important thing was not to fill the silence. Come back in 3 days, she said. He came back in 3 days, and in 2 days after that. And again after that, not because the fever required it, but because he had taken to bringing things. Not gifts, exactly. Findings. A note about the Eastern Trail he had mentioned, which he had confirmed was passable after the autumn rains. A correction to the distances on the local map posted in the square, which were wrong in the specific way of maps drawn by people who had estimated rather than measured. A small jar of something from the market that the vendor had said was good for tired eyes, which Wren had no opinion on medically, but which seemed relevant. She accepted these things without ceremony and without the performance of gratitude that would have made him uncomfortable. She simply received them and used them or noted them, which was its own form of acknowledgement. On the day he brought the trail note, she was in the middle of treating a farmer's infected foot. He waited on the listing bench and listened to her through the curtain. The same matter-of-fact calm, the same precise information, The same voice that gave people what they needed without asking them to perform being fine when they weren't. When the farmer left, she came out and found him still on the bench. "You waited," she said. "I wasn't in a hurry." She sat down on the bench beside him, which she had not done before. Not beside him, a foot of distance appropriate. The distance of a healer and a patient who was not quite a patient anymore. She looked at the square outside. "How many more days before you clear me?" he said. "4," she said. "If you actually rest. I've been resting." "You've been doing the right kind of thing," she said. "That's different." He looked at her sideways. "You remembered that." "I remember things patients tell me," she said. "It's useful." "You remember things that aren't medically relevant?" A pause. "Sometimes," she said. She was still looking at the square. A woman crossing with a basket. A dog investigating something near the well. The ordinary afternoon of a border town. "You said your mind rests when it's working." "I thought about that." Another pause. "I don't know what mind does. I haven't tried to find out." Wren said nothing. He had learned by now when the silence was one she needed. "The war," she said, after a while. 6 years ago. I was a battlefield medic for 4 years before that. After there was so much need. The border towns had almost nothing. Ashveil had no one. She was still looking at the square. "I came and I stayed and I have been staying ever since, and I'm not sure when staying became not leaving." Her hands were in her lap, still for once. "There's a difference." "Yes," Wren said. "There is." She looked at him then, sideways, a look he had not seen her give before, not the assessment, not the clinical attention, but something more uncertain. The look of someone who has said something true and is not sure what to do with it now that it's out. "You map things that haven't been looked at carefully," she said. "Yes, that's what you're doing here." He thought about how to answer that. He had been doing it. He was always doing it. The habit of attention was not something he turned off. But this had not been professional. This had been something else that he did not have a precise word for, which was unusual for a man whose work was naming things. "I think," he said carefully, "that I came in with a fever and found something more interesting than the plateau." Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I have 4 more patients today," she said. "I know, and tomorrow is the market day supply run." "I know." "I'm not." She stopped, tried again. "I don't have a great deal of time that isn't accounted for." "I'm not asking for your time," Wren said. "I'm sitting on a bench. You can sit on the same bench or not." She looked at him. Something in her face. Not soft. She was not a soft person, but something that had been held tightly for a long time, and was considering whether it was still necessary. "You're a strange man," she said. 11 years of traveling alone," he said. "I've been told." She almost smiled. The almost of it, the ghost of a thing that had once been habitual and was remembering how. She stood up. 4 days, she said. "Rest, the right kind." "I know which kind," he said. She went back inside. He stayed on the bench and looked at the square and thought about maps and about the things that didn't appear on them and about how you named something when you found it for the first time. The fever cleared on schedule. She examined him on the appointed day with the same efficient attention and said, "You can travel in 3 days." 3 days, he said. "Your strength isn't fully back. The altitude and the plateau approach will." 3 days, he said. Not arguing, just receiving the information. She made the note in the ledger. He watched her write it. Cleared to travel, date 3 days. His name in her small, precise handwriting. "Sarah," he said. She looked up. "When did you last eat a meal that wasn't standing up or between patients?" She opened her mouth, closed it. The expression of someone who has been asked a question they have not been asked before and is finding the answer unexpectedly complicated. "I eat at the bench sometimes," she said. "At the clinic bench, yes. Between patients, usually." Wren looked at his hands, the ink on the side of his finger from the morning's mapping, the old scar on his knuckle from the gray vast fall. "The landlady where I'm staying," he said. "She does a dinner on the last night of each week. I've been eating there. It's actual food, at a table." He looked up. "I have 3 days. You have some evenings, presumably." Sarah held the ledger. Her thumb moved along the spine of it, a small unconscious motion. "I have some evenings," she said carefully. "Then one of them could be dinner," he said, "at a table, not standing up, not between patients." He met her eyes. "You asked me what was wrong when I came in. I'm asking what you need." The amber eyes, the thing in them that was not quite certainty and not quite hesitation, but something navigating between the two. "You're leaving in 3 days," she said. "Yes." "That's a short time," for she stopped. "For dinner," he said, specifically. "Whatever else is a separate question." She set the ledger down. She looked at the curtain, the shelf, the instruments in their ordered places. The clinic that was her entire life arranged around her. "What time?" she said. "Whenever your last patient is done," he said. "I'll be at the bench." He was at the bench. She came at the 7th hour, still in her working clothes. She had not changed, which he understood was not negligence, but the announcement of limited time and no performance. He liked this about her. He liked many things about her with the specific clarity of someone who had spent 2 weeks paying attention. They ate at the landlady's table. Real food at an actual table with other people around them who talked about ordinary things, the market, the weather, the road conditions north. Sarah sat across from him and ate with the focused attention she gave everything. And when the landlady asked her about the Hartmere consultation she had done last month, she answered fully, and without the careful hedging she sometimes used with patients. At ease with information, at ease with being asked. After, they walked to the square, cold night air, stars sharp, and many above the border town's modest lights. "I'd forgotten," Sarah said. "What?" "That," she said, indicating the table they had left, the ordinary evening of it. "I used to, before. In the wars there were evenings sometimes. After the work, people would sit together." She was looking at the stars. "I forgot that it was something I did." "The right kind of rest," Wren said quietly. She looked at him. The ghost smile again, more than a ghost this time. "Yes," she said, "something like that." They stood in the square in the cold night. He thought about the plateau, the unmapped approach, the 3 mutually contradictory expedition reports. He thought about Kalu's mistake, the lake with no name, the 4 days he had walked in the wrong direction, and the map he had corrected because of it. "When I leave," he said, "I go north for the plateau approach, and then east after toward the sail coast. There are discrepancies in the coastal maps that need resolving." He paused. "The route comes back through Ashveil." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Most routes come through Ashveil," she said. "It's the junction." "This one specifically," he said. "In about 6 weeks, maybe 8. She looked at him. "Cartographers are very precise about distances," she said, "and vague about time." "Time is harder than distance," he said. "Distance stays where you put it. Time moves." 6 weeks, she said. "Maybe 8, yes." She looked at the stars again. He watched her face. The tired lines that were not quite age, the quality of attention she gave even the night sky. The woman who had been staying in the same place for 6 years, because staying had become not leaving and had not yet become choosing. "The clinic will still be here," she said. It was not an invitation exactly. It was something more careful and more honest than an invitation. It was the truth of the situation stated plainly, which was how she said everything that mattered. "I know," he said. "I'll find it on my map." "It's not on any map." "It will be," he said. She looked at him then with the full amber attention, and he held it the way he had learned to hold silence, without flinching, without filling it, letting it be what it was. 6 weeks, she said. "Maybe 8. "Yes," he said. "I'll be here," she said. "Not I'll be here if you come back, not I'll be here probably, just I'll be here." The flat, certain statement of a woman who had been staying for 6 years and was, for the first time, choosing it. He went back to his rented room. He sat at the small desk and opened his working map of the Ashveil region and found the east side of the main square and made a small, precise mark where the clinic was, with its listing bench and its herbs and its healer who had forgotten what dinner at a table felt like. He wrote beside it, in his small, careful handwriting, Voss Clinic, Sarah Voss, Healer, Border Town Junction, Essential. Then he sat back and looked at the word essential and did not change it. He left in the morning, 3 days after she had cleared him. She was at the clinic when he went to say goodbye. Where else would she be? He stood in the doorway with his pack and his instruments and his 11 years of habit, and she stood behind the counter with her ledger and her herbs and her 6 years of staying. "The doses worked," he said. "They usually do," she said. "You were right about the weather window. I have time." "I'm usually right about windows," she said. "Medical ones, anyway." He looked at the curtain, the listing bench, the herbs, the clinic that smelled still faintly of the stable it had been. "Sarah," he said. "Wren," she said. 6 weeks. Maybe 8. "Yes." He adjusted the pack. "Is there anything you need? From the north or the coast? Anything I could bring back that would be useful?" She looked at him. Then, with the careful deliberation of someone making a note in a ledger, "There's a herb that grows on the plateau approach," she said. "Grey root, the dried form. The Hartmere Clinic uses it for chest complaints, but I haven't been able to get it reliably. If you see it, what does it look like?" She described it. He wrote it in his notebook, the small one from his coat pocket, with the same careful attention he gave to topographical features and river junctions. She watched him write it. The expression on her face, not soft. She was not a soft person, but something that had found a new position, like a joint that had been held tense for years and had finally, carefully released. "Grey root," he said. "Got it." "Don't go out of your way," she said. "I won't," he said. She probably knew he would. Neither of them said so. He went. At the edge of the square, he looked back. She was in the clinic doorway, tall, green-skinned, arms folded, watching him go with the full amber attention she gave everything. He raised a hand. She raised one back. He turned north and walked toward the plateau and thought about maps and about the things that didn't appear on them and about a woman in a border clinic who had not left for herself in 4 years and had just, quietly, decided to be here when he came back. He came back in 7 weeks. Not 6. Not 8. 7, because the plateau approach had been straightforward and the coastal discrepancies had resolved faster than expected. And because he was willing to admit to himself on the road back, been moving with a specific destination in mind rather than the general forward motion that had characterized 11 years of travel. He came through the Ashveil gate at midday with a pack considerably heavier than when he had left, partly from the new maps and partly from the grey route, which he had found on the plateau approach exactly where she had described it, and which he had gathered with the careful attention of someone who understood that this was for chest complaints, and not for any other reason he was not yet naming. The clinic was in the East Square. He had marked it on his map and did not need the map. He knocked on the clinic door. He heard from inside the sounds of someone finishing something, instruments, water, a drawer, the same sounds. The curtain moved. She came out and found him standing in the doorway with his pack and his maps and a cloth bundle of grey root, and the expression of a man who had been precise about his destination for 7 weeks. She looked at him. He looked at her. 7 weeks, she said. The coastal maps were faster than expected, he said. You said 6 or 8. 7 is between 6 and 8. Something moved in her face. Not the ghost smile, the real one, brief and complete, opening her face the way a door opens when the latch finally finds its catch. "Did you find the grey root?" she said. He held out the bundle. She took it, examined it with the focused attention she gave everything, turning it in her long-fingered hands. "This is good," she said. "This is exactly right. You described it well. You listened carefully." She set the bundle on the counter, her hands stilled. "How long are you staying?" Wren looked at the listing bench, at the herbs hanging from the beams, at the curtain, faded green, and the woman behind the counter who was tired in the bones and had not left for herself in 4 years and had said, "I'll be here," with the flat certainty of a choice. "I need to redraw the Asheville regional map," he said. "The one in the square is wrong in several places. The eastern trail distances, the river junction, Northtown, the elevation markers, and the plateau approach." He set his pack down. "It will take some time to do properly." "How much time?" she said. "I'm not sure," he said. "Time is harder than distance." She looked at him with the full amber attention. He held it. "There's dinner on the last night of each week," she said. "At your landlady's, I know. I have some evenings," she said, "not all of them, but some. Some is enough," he said, "to start." She picked up the grey root and turned to the shelf and began making room for it with the precise movements of someone who knows exactly where everything goes. Her back was to him. Her shoulders, he noticed, had a different quality than when he had left. Not relaxed exactly, she was not a relaxed person, but settled. The shoulders of someone who had been holding something for 6 years, and had, sometime in the last 7 weeks, allowed themselves to put it down for an hour at a time, and find that the thing they were carrying did not immediately collapse without constant attention. "The bench in the square," she said, still facing the shelf. "For your mapping work." "Yes, it's still there. I saw it on the way in," he said, still listing to the left. "I've been meaning to have someone look at it," she said. "I'll look at it," he said. "I'm good at noticing things that need attention." She turned. The amber eyes. The tired lines. The woman who had been staying in the same place for 6 years and was, for the first time, glad of it. "I know," she said. "I noticed." Outside, Ashveil went about its afternoon, the market winding down, the road bringing its usual travelers, the square filling with the ordinary business of a border town that was the junction of several routes and the destination of none. People passed through. Some stayed. Some who had been staying had started quietly to choose it. Wren sat down on the listing bench and opened his working map and began, carefully and with full attention, to correct what had been wrong. Inside the clinic, Sarah Voss put the grey root on the shelf in the space she had made for it and went to see her next patient. and did not feel, for the first time in longer than she could precisely calculate, entirely alone in the building. The bench outside would need fixing. The maps would need correcting. There was always something that needed doing. The difference this time was that she was not the only one doing it. And the bench took him 2 days to fix properly. Not because it was complicated. The left rear leg had developed a rot pocket where water had been pooling in the joint, which required replacing a section of wood rather than simply tightening a bolt, which was what the previous attempt at fixing it had done and why it had continued to list. Wren spent the first day sourcing the right wood from the carpenter on the south side of the square, who looked at him with the expression of a man being told his bench was wrong, and acknowledged this with the grace of someone who had not built the bench himself. He spent the second day doing the actual work. Sarah came out at mid-morning with a cup of tea and set it on the bench beside his tools without comment. He thanked her. She said he'd already paid her and went back inside. He drank the tea and continued working and thought that this was, in his experience, one of the better forms of company. The bench was level by afternoon. He sat on it to test it. It did not list. He put his mapping instruments on it and they lay flat, which was the actual test, a level surface for precise work. He sat with the instruments and the map in the afternoon light and felt, as he sometimes felt in places he had been correcting toward for some time, the specific satisfaction of a thing being as it should be. Sarah came out at the end of her last patient. She stood in the clinic doorway and looked at the bench. "It's level," she said. "Yes." She came and sat on it, beside him, a foot of distance, the same distance as before. She tested the level with her hand, palm flat on the worn wood. "The carpenter said it couldn't be fixed without replacing the whole leg," she said. "The carpenter was looking at the symptom," Wren said, "not the cause." She looked at him sideways. "You do that a lot," she said. "Look for the cause." "Maps are mostly causes," he said. "Why is the river here? Why does the road go this way instead of that way? Why is the town at this elevation and not a mile lower where the water is easier?" He looked at the square, the late afternoon light on the old stone. Everything is where it is for a reason. Finding the reason is most of the work. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her hand still on the bench. "And Ashveil," she said. "What's the reason for Ashveil?" "Junction," he said. "4 roads meet here. The Northern Plateau approach, the coastal road, the Hartmere track, and the old border pass that everyone uses but no one officially acknowledges." He paused. "But that's the geographic reason. Towns need more than geography." "What else?" "People who stay," he said. "A town is geography plus the people who decided the geography was worth building around." He looked at the clinic. 6 years ago, Ashveil had the junction but not the clinic. Now it has both. That changes who stays. Which changes the town. Sarah looked at the clinic door, the worn threshold, the herbs just visible through the window. "I didn't think about it that way," she said. "I thought about the need. There was need and I had the skill and I came." "That's how most important things get built," Wren said. "Not because someone planned them. Because someone had the skill and saw the need and showed up." She was quiet. The square was emptying as the afternoon moved toward evening. The market vendors packing up, the travelers heading to their lodgings, the ordinary end of an ordinary day in a border town that was a junction for several routes, and the destination of more people than officially came looking for it. "You're mapping Ashveil," she said, "in the regional map." "Correcting it," he said. "It was wrong." "What was wrong about it?" "The clinic wasn't on it," he said. She turned to look at him fully, the amber eyes catching the late light. "Clinics don't usually appear on regional maps," she said. "They should," he said. "They're essential infrastructure. If I'm injured 3 days north of Ashveil, the most important thing on any map of this region is the location of the nearest healer." He looked at his working map, spread on the now level bench, the small precise mark he had made weeks ago. Voss Clinic, Sarah Voss, healer, essential. Maps are supposed to tell you what's actually there, not just the terrain. The terrain plus the things that make the terrain survivable. Sarah looked at the mark on the map, her name in his small, precise handwriting, the word essential. "You wrote essential," she said. "I know. That's a strong word for a map notation." "It's an accurate word," he said. "I try to be accurate." She looked at the map for a long moment. Then she looked at him. The full attention, the amber eyes. The woman who had been a battlefield medic and a border healer, and who was tired in the bones and had not yet decided that being tired was a reason to stop. "The dinners," she said, "on the last night of the week." "Yes, I've been going," she said, "since you came back." "I know," he said, "I've been there. Before, I only went occasionally, when there was a specific reason." She was quiet. Now I go because. She stopped. Tried again with the precision she gave everything. Because I said I had some evenings. And I am trying to use them. Ren looked at his map, the correction marks, the new notations, the slowly emerging accurate picture of this particular piece of the world. How is that going? He said. Better than I expected, she said. Worse than I would like sometimes. I forget. Mid-evening, I'll remember something at the clinic. A patient I want to check on, a dose I'm not sure I recorded correctly. She looked at her hands. I've been staying for 6 years and I'm not sure I know how to not stay. That's not a thing you learn all at once, Ren said. It's a thing you practice. He looked at her hands, the long-fingered healer's hands still for once, not holding instruments or making notes. You could start small. An hour at the bench, a dinner that goes to the second course before you think about the clinic. I've been getting to the second course, she said. I know, he said. I've noticed. She looked at him with the ghost smile. You notice things. It's my job. Not this, she said. This isn't your job. He looked at the map, at the small mark on the east side of the square, at the word beside it. No, he said. This isn't my job. The evening settled around them. Cold came with the dark, the border town cold that arrived quickly and stayed. She did not go inside immediately. He did not suggest she should. They sat on the level bench in the cooling evening and looked at the square and the old stone and the stars beginning to appear above the junction town that was a destination for more people than it knew. Ren, she said. Sarah. The maps you're correcting, she said. The regional ones. How long will they take? Depends, he said, on how precise I want to be. How precise do you want to be? He thought about this. He thought about the coastal maps that had resolved faster than expected because he had been moving with a specific destination in mind. He thought about the plateau, which had been exactly as contradictory as the 3 expedition reports had suggested, and which he had resolved by going and looking carefully. He thought about 11 years of maps, and about the things that didn't appear on them, and about a border clinic on the east side of a square that was now marked essential on his working copy. Very precise, he said. It'll take some time. Sarah nodded slowly. I have some evenings, she said. Not all of them. Some is enough, he said. To continue. She stood. She looked at the clinic door, the worn threshold, the herbs. Then she looked at the bench level now, solid, doing its job. The carpenter said it couldn't be fixed, she said. Most things can be fixed, Ren said. If you find the cause rather than the symptom. She looked at him for a moment with the full amber attention. Something in her face. Not the smile, not the ghost of it, but the place where the smile lived when it wasn't being expressed. The face of a woman who had been holding something for a long time and was learning, carefully and without rushing, to put it down. Good night, Ren, she said. Good night, Sarah. She went inside. He sat on the level bench in the cold evening and worked on the map until the light went, adding the corrections with the small, precise marks of a man doing the work carefully, because the work mattered, and because the thing he was mapping was worth getting right. Inside the clinic, a lamp burned late. He could see it through the window, not the lamp of someone working on a patient, but the lamp of someone who was, for the first time in a while, simply there, present in the space without an immediate purpose, resting in the way that was the right kind of resting. Ren packed his instruments and folded the map and stood up from the level bench. He looked at the clinic window, the warm lamp behind it. Tomorrow there were more corrections to make. The northern elevation markers were still wrong, and the river junction needed resurveying, and the plateau approach needed its trail times adjusted for the actual conditions rather than the estimated ones. He had, he thought, found a very good reason to be precise. He went to his lodgings. He slept well. In the morning, he would go back to the bench and the map and the work that took as long as it took, and she would come out between patients with tea that she handed over without ceremony, and they would talk or not talk, and the evenings would come and some of them would be theirs. The map was getting better every day. So was everything else.